Well, in the end, something had to come along, didn't it, to ease the Prime Minister's agony, and it emerged in the form of an interview with Sky News by Sir Jim Ratcliffe, one of Britain's wealthiest people, worth an estimated 17 billion sterling, of course, the founder of Ineos, a man, of course, that owns refineries up in Scotland, a hugely successful businessman in every way, and, of course, a major shareholder and very actively involved with the running of Manchester United, whose fortunes on the pitch have turned quite a bit in the last few weeks. But these couple of sentences last night caused quite a storm.
You can't have an economy with 9 million people on benefits and huge levels of immigrants coming in. I mean, the UK is being colonised. It's costing too much money. It'll cause. Well, yeah. The UK is being colonised by immigrants, really, isn't it?
Well, I wonder, is he a complete outrider saying that? Remember this from Keir Starmer not so long ago.
Nations depend on rules, fair rules. Sometimes they're written down, often they're not. But either way, they give shape to our values. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together.
So really quite similar in many ways, but that's all changed now. No. The Prime Minister's turned his back on that. He said that Ratcliffe, his comments were offensive and wrong. Rachel Reeves said unacceptable, disgusting, frankly. Now, actually what he said about the population increase from 58 million to 70 million is true. What he said about 9 million people of working age being on benefits is true. By the way, to be fair, some of them are on in-work benefits. But if you've got that number of people on benefits, you clearly don't need mass migration. It was the use of the word colonised that caused the problem. But I thought to myself, what does colonised actually mean? Well, it means when a group of people go into a different country and effectively take it over and turn it into their interpretation of what it ought to be, as opposed to what it was before. I mean, have a look at Whitechapel Tube Station. And you can see, it may be there in English, but it's there in a foreign language as well. And what about the Tower Hamlets Labour Party? Well, there we don't just have English, we have several other foreign languages. Now, look, I'm teasing ever so slightly, but the use of the word colonised, if we take that out of the equation, and by the way, that's what he apologised for today, not what he said, but the overall comment that mass migration has fundamentally changed our country, that the numbers are unacceptable, and that it's made us poorer, I think he's right. What do you think? Is Sir Jim right or not? Let me know. Farage@gbnews.com. Joining me down the line to discuss this, David Goodhart, Head of Demography, Immigration and Integration at Policy Exchange, and somebody who's written extensively about this. David, apart from the use of the word colonised, there wasn't much he said that was wrong, was there?
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living, and maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind. The more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver, and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
Not really, no. I mean, it's the kind of usual ritual, isn't it? Somebody sort of blurts out something from their unconscious, and they're forced to retract. And you see this a lot, particularly when it comes to emotional issues like immigration. I mean, I sort of wish that he'd focused more on the unproductive nature. You know, he's a businessman. He's a ruthless and incredibly successful businessman. And, you know, we listen to him when he talks about sort of business and economic issues. You know, when he talks about energy costs, you know, he's closing down most of his plants in the UK because of our ridiculous energy costs. And when he talks about immigration, you know, rather than use inflammatory language that is going to cause this sort of ruction, he should be talking about how unproductive so much of our recent immigration has been, particularly the Boris wave. You know, this is one of the reasons why, you know, even this government is trying to push back the point at which people get settlement rights. Because when you get settlement rights, you know, you have full access to the welfare state, you can bring in relatives and so on. I mean, the argument for immigration for many decades was that it was economically beneficial. And there was an element of truth to that. The East European, Central and Eastern European immigration was kind of economically even, I think. It certainly wasn't negative. But the recent, mainly non-European immigration that we call the Boris wave has been, you know, is going to give an enormous bill to this country. I mean, he should really have focused on that. I mean, I think he was sort of groping towards that, talking both about unproductive immigration, but also unproductive people who are already here. You know, our huge benefit bills that have expanded enormously in the last few years.
David Goodhart, as ever, thank you for joining us on the programme. Well, I thought David put that absolutely beautifully, simply. I'm joined in the studio by Labour peer Lord John Cryer and by Sir Michael Ellis, former Conservative Attorney General. I mean, your party's all over the place on this, isn't it? 1 minute, the Prime Minister's using language very similar to that used by Sir Jim, but now it's offensive and wrong.
I think using the word colonised, I mean, that's an extraordinary word to use. I mean, as you know, I think that the Labour Party, for a long time, got something very badly wrong, whereby anybody who raised immigration as an issue, you're outrageous, you can't talk about all of it. I mean, that doesn't happen now. Shabana Mahmood definitely doesn't have that view. But then there's a big difference between raising legitimate concerns about mass migration, about open borders, which I've never supported, as you know, and saying, well, we're being colonised. I mean, we're not being colonised. It's the wrong word to use.
Well, there are parts of the UK that aren't recognisable as being English or British.
There are parts of the UK that have changed. Yeah, when you get the rapidity of change, which I've seen, I mean, I used to live very close to an area which changed very rapidly, you then get a sense of insecurity, and I can understand that. But I think something like 15% of people in Britain were born in another country. So that's not being colonised. But I take your point about certain areas. But I think an awful lot of people who came to this country, you know, post-war years to help rebuild Britain after the war, all that kind of thing, when they hear Jim Ratcliffe talk about colonised, they find it deeply offensive.
So the wrong word, the right general message.
Oh, he raised these reasonable points, but I mean, a lot of the facts that he gave are wrong. He said that between 2020 and 2025, the population has increased by 12 million.
It was between 2000 and... Yeah, I know. There was an inaccuracy there. But actually, at the turn of the century, it was 58 million, and it is now 70 million. So it's a 12 million increase and 85% plus.
Over 26 years. So he said it was over the past 5 years.
That was an error.
He got a few other things wrong.
That was an error. That was an error.
Nigel.
You know, Michael, here's the thing. I mean, and I have huge respect for David Goodhart, you know, who has been very brave on this subject early on at a time when
politics changed,
you know, as John says, at a time when he was slagged off for even touching the issue. Yeah. But as he says, the real problem is your lot. It's the Boris wave that's going to cost us the real money.
Well, I mean, let's look at Jim Ratcliffe for a moment. Look, He's not a politician. And all I want to say is, give me a break. These pylons that we see, and the Prime Minister somehow has time to send a tweet about the comment of a private individual. He's not a public figure. He's not a public office holder.
No.
He's a private individual. He's inelegantly expressed himself. And the reality is there an issue on immigration? Yes, there very much is. But this is a man who's a job creator. He's not a politician. He has created... Labour have destroyed 7 times more jobs than he has created.
Well, Grangemouth, of course. I mean, we talked about this. Grangemouth is on the verge of closure. Yeah. I mean, there it is. It's the biggest manufacturing unit in the whole of Scotland. Because of energy prices, as David mentioned, it's about to go.
But these pylons where people then feel that they can't speak their mind because they're torn to shreds, I think it's disproportionate. The Prime Minister tweeting about it, and the reality is there are issues. This is a man who's created many jobs in this country,
and paid lots of tax,
and paid lots and lots
over
of tax.
the years. Yeah,
and perhaps the words are not the words that politicians, seasoned politicians, with all the technocratic language that Keir Starmer comes out with. He's not going to say it in quite that way, although he himself, the Prime Minister, has got into trouble with his own party in the past year for some of the speeches that he's made and some of the phrases that he's used. So I don't think he's one to get on his high horse and start preaching. Yes, it was inelegantly expressed, but the reality is I think most of your viewers would acknowledge that the root of what he was talking about, there are issues.
What are our viewers and listeners going to think in 2 or 3 years' time, when huge numbers that were brought into this country by the Conservative Party are being put on benefits for the rest of their lives?
Well, look, there have been issues largely due, of course, to the inability to remove people because of the legal blockages that I've often spoken about, which both Labour and the Conservatives had to deal with, and which any future government would also have to deal with, by the way, unless that's sorted out. So those are some of the issues here. But, I mean, the root of the problem we recognise, I think everybody recognises, needs to be dealt with. And, I do hope that... the Prime Minister can get some proper advice. I mean, perhaps appoint a cabinet secretary to replace the outgoing one, because he needs some advice. Spending his time tweeting about this sort of thing and adding to the pile-on is just too much.
Yeah,